Welcome to the Clutch Time Podcast with your host, Daniel Kreider and Ryan Vargas. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. It's a Clutch Time Podcast coming at you. Do we got to wait for the beat to kick in, Ryan?
Here it goes.
Let's do it. Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is. There it is. That one gets me every week, you know. So, man, lots to talk about in this episode, everybody. Once again, we have Ryan Palmer with us, along with my co-host, Ryan Vargas. And fellas, what's cracking this week?
Man, busy week, man. It was a good week, a busy week personally, trying to get Clutch Time all ready.
Yeah.
We're getting close, man. We're getting really close, which is good. Hoop should go up this week and the floor should be done. So hopefully by Friday, we should be all dialed in.
Nice.
As far as sports go, man, crazy weekend. I'm excited to dive into that with you guys.
Yeah, let's kick it off. We got Ryan Palmer with us, and once again, our football analysis, the professional analysis. Ryan, what's your take on this week in college football? Come on,
first off,
give us some wisdom, my friend.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for calling me a professional. In fact, I'm so professional, I was able to afford this great traveling studio that I have going on here. So if you wonder where I'm at for you video watchers over on YouTube, please subscribe and like. Yeah, I am in my car studio because just like Clutch Time, I am clutch. So,
man, I'm going to buy a new pair of waders. It's getting deep over here.
Well, don't hate the player, hate the game. But
all right.
As far as the college football season's going, I am very pleased. And primarily today, I'm going to talk about this with you guys because I think a lot of times we get caught up on the X's and O's, any given Saturday, who wins,
right,
or who wins. So before I actually get into that, I kind of want to take a step back. And when people talk about the SEC being the conference of champions and how stacked that conference is,
right,
are they really talking about the SEC, or are they talking about the SEC West, which is your Alabama, LSU, your Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Georgia? Because as far as I see it, the SEC East is not very strong. The only contender you really have is Georgia and University of Kentucky, which has only had one loss to Georgia, which Georgia seems to be, the front runner. But I don't know if I would really call them the conference that is beyond all conferences. I would actually consider the Big Ten to be that conference, because as it sits right now, the Big Ten East has 3 teams in the top 10: Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State. Yeah. Oh, and I think Penn State's still in there. But what I really want to focus on, and I want your guys' input on this, like when you guys talk about basketball and baseball, I'm assuming because you guys are fanatics and you guys are coaches as well, how much of that are you actually paying attention to the game itself? And then how much are you paying attention to the stuff that kind of happens behind the scenes? GM changes, coaching changes, so on and so forth.
Vargas, I'll let you take the first rip on that one.
I feel like these days, Palmer, I feel like we, especially with basketball-wise, basketball hasn't necessarily been going on per se as far as the NBA goes, but I feel like majority of the time with us, we talk a lot about right now, at least things off the court, man. And I don't know if that's just because it's not mid-season. Had it been mid-season, there'd probably be a lot more game talk. But, and I'm sure Danny could speak more about baseball. But as far as basketball goes, man, our conversations have been about, these players being mandated to do certain things. These players not checking into training camp, possibly being traded. So I guess to answer your question, a lot of it seems to be more off the court stuff.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, same thing. It's really, but it's weird because the behind the stuff, nobody pays attention to as much as they should. And this is the reason. So they're like for baseball, for instance, you had Mike Schilt. He was the manager for the St. Louis Cardinals. Took them to the playoffs, right? They had a crappy season that went on a 17-game win streak. Guess what? He gets off the plane. Boom, you're fired. This is a guy who's been in the organization for 20 years, and there's lots of, in college in particular, there's so much demand on these guys anymore that it's almost like the people in charge are like the spoiled rich kids, and they're like, I don't like what you're doing. You're fired. I'm going to find somebody else and move on. And I feel like they need to start getting more of a balance on those types of things. And then, of course, like Ryan pointed out, you got the mandates and all this kind of stuff that, it's getting a little crazy to me. And I think some guys, I mean, these coaches make a lot of money. I get it, but there's nothing like bringing a guy in and then and especially when they're a winning program and have won, and then you just boot them to the curb and say, okay, we're done with you. It's like, wow, talk about being treated like a lesser than, you know what I mean? So, and I think that's where you were going with that, Palmer.
It was. And as far as being treated as a lesser than, I don't know what that feels like, because I'm always treated to the upper echelons of my fame in my studio here in my car. But yeah, no, that is where I'm going with this. So a lot of people, the majority of the people, would look at basically the X's and O's, what happens on Saturday.
Right.
And that's their entire knowledge of college football. Now, the reason why I'm here today is to educate people in hopefully a fun manner about the other 40%. College football in particular is kind of like the days of our lives. It's a soap opera.
It is.
There's a lot of drama, a lot of storylines. And so this entire weekend, I was pretty much just looking at scouting reports as far as who the next coach is going to be. So for you guys who don't know, USC, University of Southern California, the Trojans, a typical powerhouse program, really did great, in the early 2000s, hasn't really had that stretch of success, just fired Clay Helton this year. And today I come to find out that LSU, who won the national championship in 2019 with Ed Orgeron, is now going to part ways with that coach as well. And those two jobs being vacant at the same time is going to change the trajectory of football. And this is what I mean by that. Talking about spoiled fan bases and spoiled boosters, these two programs are very impatient. I mean, for God's sake, LSU won a national championship 2 years ago. They just beat a top 25 team last night, and they're letting their coach go because he's not winning enough. And so at this point, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a new up-and-comer from these smaller schools? And I love these smaller schools. Cincinnati's ranked number 2 right now. I think that's probably the dumbest thing you can do, because if they actually play Georgia in the national championship, I think this year would be like a 70-0 win for Georgia. But I love the fact that these smaller schools like Cincinnati, SMU, the Ponies, or whatever they're called, they're down in Texas. UTSA is another team down in Texas that's ranked for the first time in the school's program's history. So are you going to pull those coaches? Well, I don't think so, just because LSU is a huge brand and it's a huge recruiting pot down in Louisiana. And so the reason why they typically wouldn't go for one of those hot shots is because you have to be able to recruit. So there's two types of winning in college football. There's obviously this wins on Saturday, and then there are the recruiting, being a top 10 recruiting class. And you have to do that right off the cuff, or else they're going to get impatient and they're going to fire you like Ed Orgeron. So what are the coaches down south that they're willing to take from another program to be successful? I mean, we can talk about Mark Stoops over at Kentucky, who is 6-1, taking a typical basketball school
right
now into a football power, quote unquote, for this year. I mean, or maybe taking who's Ole Miss? Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin would easily leave Ole Miss to LSU, because I mean, LSU has won 3 national championships within my lifetime. Ole Miss hasn't won any national championships as far as I remember. So it's and then the old mighty dollar comes into play.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Now, when it comes to the USC job, this is a tricky one, because essentially USC getting a good football coach and getting to the national championship level. And before I keep going, I'm hearing a little buzz. Is that me or are you guys hearing me just fine?
No, we can hear you just fine. Just keep rolling.
All right. USC and being in the national spotlight is in direct correlation to whether or not the Pac-12 will ever be relevant again in the scope of football. They are abysmal. I mean, there's only one ranked team right now in Oregon, and they lost to Stanford, and they barely beat a Cal team by a touchdown. And they beat them, or this Cal team, to show you how bad they are. Their only win this year was against a much smaller school in Sacramento, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
and they only won 24-17. So yeah,
exactly. And so you have to find a coach. Oh, here we go, rolling blackouts. Hang on. Now I'll just keep plugging away. The thing that's scary about the coach for USC, this is almost like a coaching graveyard. So when you're talking about a coach getting fired on the tarmac, well, that happened. Rolling blackouts. Here we go. I must be in California. All right, turning on the car. Yeah, Lane Kiffin was fired on the tarmac. And
we're losing now.
Oh, here we go. All right, now can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
All right, now we're going through the speakers. So I hope I sound fine. Man, we're going for it
Sounds
today.
great, man.
Hey, that's professional stuff. Keep rocking.
Yeah. So I think they're going to probably take James Franklin over at Penn State. That Penn State loses their coach, which is another perennial power. And then let's say Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss leaves his job. So you have those two jobs now vacant. Mm-hmm. That's when you're going to start seeing these lesser, smaller schools lose their coaches. And that's something that breaks my heart personally, because I want to see Cincinnati always be dominant. But if I'm getting paid $2.5 million to be at Cincinnati, which is not even the best school in Ohio, no offense to you Bearcat fans, but let's be honest with ourselves, Ohio State is the football team of Ohio. You guys are the younger stepsister or brother, or however you identify, of that state. So he would probably take that job if offered to him. And then when we're talking about, say, Ole Miss, there's a team that a lot of people aren't really aware of called Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajun. They were ranked 25th this year to start out, but they lost to Texas and they lost that ranking. But you can't have – I don't want to jump around too much, but the healthiness of the sport is really predicated on these smaller schools mixing things up, getting these random schools out. I mean, have you guys ever heard of Eastern Carolina or Coastal Carolina?
I have, but not very often. I know they exist.
and that's the thing. I mean, they're a plucky team. I mean, their mascot's a rooster. Their football color is teal. Everybody's got a mullet. Like, this is a fun team to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you need more teams like that in the top 25, or UTSA, which I know you guys don't know about because they literally just started up in 2014. But you can't get these teams better, and you can't get the sport healthier if we keep taking those coaches to these bigger programs. And I totally understand it. If I was offered triple the amount of my income to move schools, goodbye Sean Eclairs, goodbye Molly Clyde kids who fell in love with me as I recruited them. You mean nothing to me. The almighty dollar does.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, man. And, now that you bring that up, you do see that often. And I wonder, maybe you can help me out. How often does that really work out for these coaches who jump ship like that from those smaller schools where they want to go to that big school because they were successful at a small school? I mean, I'm thinking of like Scott Frost. I'm thinking of a Willie Taggart, these coaches who, the grass is greener on the other side, almost saying like they're ready for that next jump. But it's almost like they abandon everything that they had built and they take for granted how special it is to build something, because we live in like such a now, you know what I mean? Win now, but stability, man, stability and consistency. I mean, like we talked about last week on the show, like the coolest thing and the most like admirable thing about Nick Saban is how consistent he is, and like to be able to build that over time. And I think you're right. I think the more that we see people jumping ship like that, thinking that they could just be successful anywhere, I'm curious to know how that has really panned out for people.
Well, I want to touch on that a little bit too. So one thing is I think what happens is us as coaches, and I'm coming from strictly that perspective, and I want to kind of play two sides to this. So number one is if I'm a coach, like let's say it's a basketball situation, and I have, I'm coaching, some small school, smaller school, and like you said, we built it up, and the kids know the culture, they know what's expected. The
I mean,
bar is there.
look at Shaka Smart, Danny. It's a great example.
Exactly. That's a perfect
Yeah.
example. Absolutely perfect example.
I don't like Shaka Smart because of what he did at Texas. I'm not just a Texas football fan. I'm a Texas, rugby, basketball,
Yeah.
you name it. And when they lost to like a 16th seed Texas A&M Perryville or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, you guys make a good point. I just, please don't use that name in
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that. But to answer your question, Ryan, I'm going to answer it with another question. What was the first car that you drove, and how old were you when you drove it?
My first car was a Toyota Celica. I was 16 years old.
16 years old now. Is the Celica known for its horsepower?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I was happy when that thing started up.
Yeah. And so that's what we're dealing with here. So when you are at these smaller schools, you're dealing with, in my case, it was a Nissan Pathfinder 1995, and then putting them right into a Bugatti or a Ferrari, one of those high horsepower vehicles. And so more often than not, you see these people fail. Charlie Strong is a good instance of this, where he did a lot of good things at Louisville, and this is back when Louisville wasn't part of a really big conference. Before Lamar Jackson got there, he had Teddy Bridgewater. He went to Texas, didn't pan out Texas, and now I don't even think he's coaching anymore. Same with Tom Herman, another Texas guy. Went to Houston, which is a big school, but it's not a big football program. Went to Texas. He's not coaching anymore. And I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. And so the Power 5 dream jobs, quote unquote, yeah, they come with a lot of money. And I know why they leave. It's not just the money aspect. But if we're realistic here, Cincinnati will probably never win a national championship, but probably will never get that option. Right. As the standings sit right now, yeah, they're number 2 in the playoffs. But would Cincinnati outrank a one-loss Ohio State that just went through 3 top 10 teams and win the conference championship? No. Would it beat out a undefeated Oklahoma? No. And it's not gonna beat out Georgia, who possibly loses to Alabama in the SEC championship game. So we have egos as coaches. I have an ego. I don't know about you guys. And so to get that opportunity to actually put my name, not just on building up this program to quote unquote relevant, but to win a national championship, because that's ultimately why we coach. And yeah, of course, we want to make kids into better men and all that other crap that we tell ourselves. But let's be honest, we're doing it for the championships, and so are they. And that part's a joke. So if there's any of my kids listening, yeah, I care about your well-being and all that other stuff, but I want to win. But yeah, that's why they move up.
Yeah. Well, I think too, touching on, but staying with that is the grass always does look greener. You're thinking, man, I could get higher recruits. It's a more attractive program. But what they don't understand is there's so many factors. This is my personal opinion. I'm not in that loop, so I don't know. But based on just observation, I think a lot of people just hire somebody just to be hiring them. It sounds good. I think he'll do good, not really observing and looking at their system, why he's leaving the current program he's at now. Is it because that he's frustrated there? Well, hell, if he's frustrated there, he's just going to come over with a chip on his shoulder, and, that may or may not work out. And I think we've seen some of those situations. And so, it does, that would be like, man, I can get higher recruits. I got this and everything looks great, and then it's like I said, it's like the spoiled kids. It's like, okay, well, if you don't do what I'm asking you to do. So not only that, they'll bring in high recruits. And then if they can't get those guys to all play together and perform correctly, they're quickly out the door. There isn't no, okay, we're going to give you a 5-year span. Those days are over. You got 1, 2, maybe 3 years. And if they don't see something, then it's really all about the support, the boosters, the people in the office. If they don't like what you're doing, you're gone. That's the bottom line. That's just the way it is. And I think we got too many bipolar people in those positions. That's just my opinion.
And if this was me personally, let's say I was a college coach and I get a phone call from each of these places. USC, LSU calls me and says, "Hey, Ryan, you moved the needle, so we want you at our program." There are plus sizes. There's pluses and negatives to each. If I wanted to have a little bit longer of a cushion, I would go to USC, because over at LSU in these SEC schools, you are more important to these people than the mayor, than the president, than any celebrity. You are the number one celebrity. So everybody in Alabama knows who Nick Saban is. Everybody in Mississippi knows who Lane Kiffin is. Let's say Brad Pitt's down there at Alabama, and he's sitting at the same booth as Nick Saban. More people will most likely go up to Nick Saban asking for an autograph than Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
But at USC, you're not even the most famous person probably on your street. I mean, for God's sakes, it's Los Angeles. There's so many celebrities. So you can go under the radar and have a couple losing seasons. So that's why USC would be more attractive to me. But on the flip side, going back to it, to what I said earlier, the Pac-12 is a dying conference. There's two things that really you need to have a successful college football conference, and football at least. You need your consistent winners winning. So, that's like your Alabama, in this case, Georgia, winning all the games that it should. Big 12 is Oklahoma. ACC doesn't have it. Pac-12 doesn't have it right now. But then you also need a contender. Like, you need a Mike Tyson character, and then you need a Holyfield. And so, in this particular case, it's Alabama and Georgia. Sometimes it'll be Alabama, LSU, Alabama, Florida, so on and so forth, Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. But who does Oregon have? It used to be Oregon versus USC. And when USC was winning national championships, the conference itself at the Pac-12 was pretty strong. You had constant 9-win teams. You at least had Oregon and them fighting to getting into a BCS bowl back then, or in this particular case, the national championship playoff. But without that, there's a void. And basically what you have is Oregon, who is struggling to beat teams, and then a bunch of, and if you're a Pac-12 person, you want to fight me, I'm not too concerned, because I'm going to assume you fight me like your conference plays football. And that's really terrible. So if you guys want to come at me at a bar, I'm perfectly fine. By the way, I don't condone drinking at a bar for you younger folks. But that's why I would probably go away from USC, because there is such a pressure, not of just your school performing,
mm-hmm.
but your conference maintaining that Power 5 status. And so and I know I'm a little long-winded here, but that's why I get so excited about these coaching changes, because depending on who goes there could depend whether the Pac-12 is a conference to take seriously in 2022, 23, 24. And then if LSU gets a good coach, we might be able to see someone genuinely compete and overthrow Alabama in the West, because I think people forget, outside of Alabama and Nick Saban, I would say LSU is probably the second winningest SEC team as far as national championships. It's either that or Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. And, since the Pete Carroll era ended and the Chip Kelly era began, the whole alpha of the Pac-12 completely swapped. And since then, Oregon's been able to basically maintain that top spot for the most part. Hasn't been able to win a national championship, but you're absolutely right. USC has lacked stability since then. And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's crazy to see, like, even in Los Angeles, I mean, UCLA now is having better seasons than USC to some point, which is just, it's interesting. I don't know if it's a mixture of a lot of those kids now coming up to Oregon who used to stay home and used to play for USC, and they don't now because, they just don't really know USC's not what it used to be. I'm sure it's a few things, but it's just interesting because then we jump ship to LSU. They almost seem like two dominant, or used to be dominant, programs, but it almost seem like completely different situations, because the LSU thing, that's just weird to me. Like you said, that dude won a national championship in 2019.
Yeah.
And they're getting rid of him, but they're also allowing him to like finish the season, which normally it's almost like, I feel like when they get rid of people, they just kind of get rid of people. So I don't know. That one just seems kind of weird to me. Like, is there something else going on, or I don't know. I just kind of have questions.
You made two really good points, because let's address the California thing about California kids staying home and playing for their state college. That used to be a thing. I mean, the reason why USC was so good is because there's three states in particular that have the biggest talent pools to pull from. That's Texas, that's California, that's Florida. And so that's why you'd see, back in the 90s, Florida, Florida State, Miami all be really good. That's why you saw Texas always be really good. And that's why you saw USC and UCLA be really good. But the thing is now college football recruiting is no longer regional. And these kids, they have short attention spans. Ryan, you and I were 15 when USC was dominating. So we can remember that. But those kids that are playing now, they were either in diapers or weren't even born yet. So they were growing up with the flashiness of Oregon or the complete dominance of Alabama. There's no reason on God's green earth why I would leave San Diego, California, full of beaches, the coldest it gets at 70 degrees, for Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That place is uglier than sin compared to at least San Diego. But that's what they're doing, because when they were growing up, they saw two things. There's no reason why a Thibodeau, which is the best defensive player, probably be the number one draft pick, will leave Los Angeles for Eugene, Oregon. So that's the first point I want to hit on. And then going to your, how could you fire a coach who won your national championship 2 years ago? You guys can actually thank Nick Saban. The thing is with Nick Saban, he's a double-edged sword. So all the great things that we have in college football right now with the coaches and making Tuscaloosa, Alabama sexy to California kids, which honestly is pretty remarkable if you think about it. But when he got to Alabama, he won a championship in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
When Urban Meyer got to Florida, he won a championship in 2 years. It used to be a full recruiting cycle, 4 years. Let's see what this guy has. But now there's this expectation of 2 years in a Power 5 program like Alabama, Florida, so on and so forth. It's national championship, New Year's Six Bowl, or you're a crappy coach, and those aren't necessarily synonymous with each other because there's so many different mitigating factors. Who's your coordinator? Have you recruit? Because when a lot of people think that if you recruit 5-star football players, that you're automatically going to be good.
Exactly.
I'll show you the number one team that's not that, to my chagrin, is Texas. Texas has a ton of 5-stars. These are not Coach Sarkisian's 5-star recruits. These aren't his recruits. If you look at Chip Kelly back in Oregon, he didn't get 5-star players. What he got were kids who were like 2-star, 3-star, 4-stars that fit his system. So, it's not always about who can get the best recruiting class. It's who can get the best recruiting class tailored to you. And Coach O's case, I think he's a great defensive coordinator. I think he's a good D-line coach. He sounds like he smokes a pack of cigarettes a day, and he's a phenomenal motivator. If you guys ever hear him speak, kind of talk like this, he's just a good homeboy. But is he a good head coach? No, because you can't, in today's era, and I think you guys could agree with this, as coaches, you want your kids to sometimes pick up your mannerisms, your personality, right? You can't win college football games with a tough offense. And he's a tough coach. You need more of a finesse and more analytical way of thinking when it comes to offense. So I think Coach O will be a good defensive coordinator someday. Hell, if I was to put money on it, I think Nick Saban will pick him up, make him a coordinator, and then we'll see Alabama win a couple championships. But yeah, I think I covered it right there.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because you could also use the example of, think about Coach K from Duke University and the basketball side of things. This guy gets 5-star recruits all day long, but how many national championships does he actually have? And he still has a lot. All respect, I think Coach K is amazing, but just think of all the times he had all these 5-star recruits and didn't win. There was a couple years he had loaded 5-star recruits and didn't even make the tourney. So, he never got fired, but, so I think it's very situational with some of these guys. And I think you're right. But the challenging part with like a Nick Saban and them on another side of things is he might hire a coaching staff, and then you got somebody like LSU that says, well, he's the D coordinator over at Alabama. Can we snag him? So then it becomes just a carousel of people moving around.
Be careful how you think about that, because here's the thing. What makes Nick Saban a really good coach, on top of everything I talked about last week, and I don't want to just be a Nick Saban fanatic, but he hires these people because he had to change his game. You know, college football is an evolving sport. Because back when Alabama started to win its first national championships, it was mostly running back centric and defensive centric. I mean, we can name like Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, you know, Julio Jones was the receiver, but name a quarterback from those national championship years that are playing in the NFL. They're not.
Good point.
Well, so that's when Nick Saban's like, okay, I don't want to die on this hill. So now I'm going to hire coaches like Lane Kiffin, who is an offensive guy, like Steve Sarkisian, who's an offensive guy. And now you're seeing more quarterbacks from Alabama in the NFL because of those coaches he hires. And so when we think, oh, Alabama lost another coach, I think, well, hell, who's going to be the next guy to change the game of football that Nick Saban hires?
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. So from last weekend to play, last Saturday, what was like your biggest takeaway? I know Iowa got bumped out in a pretty disappointing loss. I mean, Kentucky took a big L to Georgia. Georgia continues to look impressive. What were your takeaways, Palmer?
My biggest takeaway is kind of going back to what I was saying, is I love small schools. This is not necessarily the sexiest hot take. Let me get my little mic here, because everybody loves talking about, you know, Georgia, and I watched Georgia over Kentucky, or I watched that game. Of course, I watched Texas get shellacked in the fourth quarter by Oklahoma State, which irritates me because, you know, Texas is essentially my marriage. We started off strong, and everything was going good, but one thing goes bad, and all of a sudden we're all in ruins here and we can't finish. I always like to throw that one out there. But yeah, it's always fun to see these plucky small schools make into the top 25. So if you guys know who SMU is, it's down in Dallas, Texas. I suggest you guys watch the ESPN 30 for 30 called Pony Excess. They were really good back in the 80s, but then they received the death penalty. And to go from not having a football program for 2 years to basically being the Lions of the college football world and not winning anything, to now being ranked in the top 25, it's remarkable. Going back to, you know, the Fighting Mullets over in Coastal Carolina, and then UTSA, who just started their football program in 2014 and is, for the first time in school history, is undefeated and ranked in the top 25. Go Roadrunners. You're the best school in Texas as far as college football. I hate the Aggies. I hate what Texas is doing, but you know what, Roadrunners? I'm pushing for you.
I like it. I like it. That's good stuff. All right, let's shift gears here, fellas. Let's go over to the NFL. It looks like Tampa Bay beat the Eagles 28-22 on this last Thursday, and now we got the Raiders ended up pulling one out on Denver. There was one other one I wanted to address here, and where did it go? Oh, the Bears Packers was actually a little bit of a battle, 24-14. You know, that was pretty interesting. And right now we have the Seahawks and Steelers tied at 17.
You know, the first few weeks of the NFL are always funny because it's really hard to tell who's really good and who's not until you kind of get to the middle of the season, or week 6, week 7, week 8-ish. And that's kind of where they're getting now. And, you know, again, Arizona continues to look impressive, very impressive. And I mean, they're sitting at 6-0, but it's just the way they're beating teams. You know, they're good on both sides of the ball. You know, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they got their first win of the season.
Hey,
so they're not going to go winless. So I'm sure that felt good for them. And Urban Meyer has been going through a lot over there. But as far as teams that are for real, like really for real and look like they could be Super Bowl contenders, the Rams are tough.
Mm-hmm.
They're good. They're a good football team. The Cowboys are tough.
They are.
Good. They got a win today on the road in New England. which I heard, I don't know if this is confirmed, Dak possibly strained his calf on the last play of the game. So he has an MRI tomorrow. If that's true, and if that's ends up being an ugly injury, that will be a big setback for them for sure. But I'm curious to know you, Palmer, who do you think is for real in the NFL this year, and how do you think that's going to pan out?
Well, the Bills don't play till Monday night, so just FYI.
Yeah, the Bills too.
That's still my answer, though. I mean, the Buffalo Bills are the real deal. Of course, Tampa Bay is the real deal. I do agree Arizona is the real deal. And I don't know, guys. I feel like Cincinnati could be the real deal this year. And of course, the Ravens are the real deal. But you know who's really the real deal? The fact that the Raiders didn't even need their coach to win a football game.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Good point.
Yeah.
I don't think the Jaguars are a real deal, but the real deal here is, finally Urban Myers and Trevor Lawrence, who have probably had more paper cuts in their last 3 years than losses. That's a really bad analogy, but I'm just trying to think of something obscure that they would have more so than losses. Finally get a win. I know this is kind of old news, but Urban Meyer is a winner on and off the football field at this point, because, was it a week or two ago, he was at this bar and this random college hottie was just kind of like dancing on him. And I'm thinking like, Dan, what power do you have? I mean, because you're not that attractive, but, you go back to your college, town in Ohio State, and people just want to dance on you and buy you a drink. Well, now you have the wins to back it up in the NFL. So you know what, Urban Meyer? This one's for you. Fake beer in my hand. Here we go, buddy. Congrats on your first win.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's just facts. And it's interesting to see how the seasons is playing out. But it seems like, now as the farther we get into it, we're talking about the same teams over and over again. So it seems like it's starting to weed out some of the other stuff, and now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty where a lot of teams are showing out. Now, whether it always looks pretty or not, like we said before, a win's a win. You can, if you have a bad week and you still pull out a win, that's a heck of an accomplishment. And that's one you get excited about and learn from, and they go, we ain't playing like that no more. And
I do want to, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to put in there, the only reason I didn't put Dallas on the real deal is because their success is so dependent on Dak Prescott being healthy.
Yeah.
Because last year they were doing really good too. So I hope this is a calf strain, but if it's not, it's going to look rough. Yeah.
I would say most disappointing team for me, man, the Chargers really, really sucked this weekend. They've been riding they're sitting at 4-2 still, but 34-6 to the Ravens. And I don't know how much of that is because the Ravens are a pretty good team. But I was definitely expecting, and I guess more so hoping for a good game there based upon how the Chargers have played so far. But the Ravens, they're another team that, it's definitely going to be interesting down the stretch. And I feel like with the NFL or just football in general, it all just comes down to injuries.
It does. It does.
Who can be healthy at the end of the year? That's the main thing, because a team could be good midway through and then they're one injury away from just completely collapsing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a huge part. And I think that's what's going to separate, because if the one thing that we've seen with all these teams is they can all be beat, with the exception of the Cardinals have not been beat yet, and so it'll be interesting to see how it continues to play out. Like I said, Buffalo's got 10 at, the Titans on Monday night. I don't know. For me, I'm going to say that should be a nice little, just another check mark on Buffalo's plate, their little stats or whatever, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the farther we go. And Ryan, I think you're 100% right. It really is just going to come down to injuries, but not only just injuries in general, but who can still play and still execute if you do have some injuries, and who can't. You take, for instance, if you take Tom Brady off that Tampa Bay team, do they win any more games? I don't think so. You know what I mean? So it's going to be very critical coming into these next few weeks to see who endurance wise, who can last.
Yeah, most definitely, man.
I'm just still stuck on the fact
I
that
thought we were
Urban
paused.
Meyer, at his age, can still get a 21-year-old just buying him drinks. I mean, Urban, please hit me up. How do I do that? I'm not even getting that now. I'm 31.
He's going.
And I mean, yeah, I only coached 2A high school football, but
I
geez,
think-
Lapede.
I think you bring up a good point, and the fact that the dude still has a job after that. I mean, with the day
And
and
he
age,
has a wife.
that's what I'm saying. With the day and age that we live in, man, you get canceled quick. And
His wife's probably one of them good women that says, "Oh, Urban, you so silly."
Well, and to make this a little bit seriously, I want you guys to think of it like this, because Urban did take a shellacking. Not as bad as John Gruden, obviously,
Right.
but he did take a shellacking for this. But we have a player in the NFL right now going under multiple sexual assault charges. He's going to go
Yeah.
to court for this. And do you guys even know who I'm talking about? Does your audience? It's Deshaun Watson. So, why is it that this guy, and they're both kind of weird things, but it's just kind of weird to kind of see that. Not to get political or anything, but for God's sakes, I don't remember Deshaun Watson getting crucified. But God forbid a attractive young woman wants to dance on a married man who has won national championships at Ohio State. I understand it. I just wish I was getting that level of success to have girls want to, buy me drinks. But it's in poor taste, of course, because he is married. But yeah.
I better cut this off before we get in trouble.
If you guys need to save the show, go ahead, cut me. It's okay.
No, you're good. It keeps it interesting.
Palmer, I think you bring up such a good point, and it's almost hard not to get political when you talk about sports these days. As sad as that is to say, because sports used to be the safe haven where you could kind of break away from that. But going back to John Gruden, I didn't even look at the emails. I don't care, whatever. Like, I'm not condoning anything the man said. You know what I mean? And if you said something that violated certain things, then yeah, you should be in trouble for that. But the hard part for me to process is that they're going to go back, what was it, 10 years, 7 years, 6 years? It's just weird to me, man. And the dude gets canceled with the Raiders, and then Tampa Bay jumps in and they want to cancel him from whatever thing they had him in. And it's just not consistent at all. And it does seem political, man. Like they're trying to make a political statement with it and using John Gruden in his situation. You hear a lot of the players talk. They're like, we would have been graceful with him. Like we would have allowed the man a chance to step up in front of us and apologize for his actions and say that I'm a changed man and I don't want to be like that anymore. I mean, good Lord, like everybody could line up. And if we want to go back 10 years on people's social media, on people's emails, I'm sure you could find dirt on everybody. You know what I mean? It's just like, where do you draw the line? And you're right. These players, I mean, there's several players in the league who have certain allegations against them, but you don't hear about it.
Dude, I can tell you
weird,
this. Man. There has been plenty of coaches that I've been around, right? And some, somewhat popular, not like high profile coaches, and has said some stuff. Let me tell you that if it ever got in the media, like some of this other stuff blasted, it would have been hellfire and brimstone, and they would have crucified them, and so, we all in one shape or form have said some stupid things or sent a stupid email. Them guys at the NFL level, yes, they need to be held accountable. I agree with that. However, they are human beings and they do have emotions. They do get pissed off. They do, it's fun to celebrate when they're happy, but the stress and things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis is just crazy. Like you said, Ryan, I'm not excusing the man from whatever. I haven't seen him, don't know, don't care. It's just that, like you said, you got a Deshaun Watson who's got all these allegations. I mean, how many other players have we seen that had those same things, but at that time it was convenient to bring them up in the media and blast them and tear them down, and so it's yeah, I agree. There's got to be some balance there. There's got to be, it either is good or it's not good, or we're going to blast everybody for it, or, whatever that looks like. But yeah, I think there needs to be some consistency, and the political stuff. I think it's silly. I think,
can I say one more thing while I got my microphone, and then I'll leave your guys' show? So I can answer the question why John Gruden would get fired versus these other players and coaches. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. Does your problems exceed your talent? If your talent exceeds your problems, you have a job.
Right.
But if for some reason your problems, I mean, I can almost guarantee you right now, if Bill Belichick or Bruce Arians, the guys who are winning Super Bowls here, had the same situation, they would probably have a job. But then what they do is like, oh, I learned from it. And Ryan, I do agree with you. We all grow in a 10-year span, for God's sakes. It doesn't matter if you're 50 now, 60. Like, you've said some things 10 years ago that you're probably not proud of, but you're willing to accept to take your lumps and change. And they're only going to give that opportunity to those who are deemed good enough, unfortunately. So no, I agree with it. And I wish it was more consistent, but I think ultimately what they wanted to do was fire John Gruden. And what's the easiest way to do it? Find something in his past.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so-
you're 100% right. 100% right.
You know, Hollywood moves the needle. But all right, guys, I'm going to leave you be. I can't wait to listen to the show, learn more about baseball.
We got you. We appreciate you, Ryan Palmer. Thanks for joining us once again. We will see you next week, my friend.
See you, Palmer.
Perfect. See you guys.
All right, Ryan, let's move right on to Major League Baseball, and then we got to wrap this thing up, man. This is lots of good information, lots of good points, opinions. And we're just going to kick off baseball real quick to get caught up here. It's we had the Dodgers in San Fran on Thursday. Dodgers pulled it out. That was a good game, close game. And then Friday we had the American League pennant game, and then Houston actually came back from Boston, which I felt like Boston had that game in the bag, but tip your hat to Houston. They battled back and they ended up winning that game, which was super impressive. And then Saturday was a big game of baseball. Boston ended up coming back, putting it back on Houston 9-5, except this time they kept the lead. Eovaldi threw that game. He won, obviously. And then we had Atlanta and LA came into the first game, and what a first game it was. We had Riley hit a walk-off hit to put Atlanta in the lead just when it looked like they were going to lose the ball game, put them up, and then carrying on till today. Right now, they are currently Atlanta and LA in game 2 with LA leading 4-3. So lots of good baseball over the last week. And man, it seemed to me it comes down to pitching and just key hits, is being able to jump on the baseball as soon as there's any type of slight mistake, hanging breaking ball. I mean, defense plays a role too, but it seems like in this series, man, it's all about, hitting, and you got to make the key defensive plays too, because that will just not go well. But all these guys are in the playoffs this far. We're one series away from the World Series.
Right.
We got these 2 series, and that's it.
Right.
So it's going to be seriously. My favorite one was the Houston game, and Correa came up, blasted a home run, and he just stood there and he was just clicking his watch, and almost like Damian Lillard, like game time.
I did see that.
Like, this is my time. I was like, some people probably don't like that. I particularly do like it. I think it's cool. I think it makes it fun.
Loved it.
You can't take that stuff personally and get all, but I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Heck of a series. I'm looking forward to the tailing part of this. And honestly, if you were to ask me, say, okay, what's your predictions going forward, as LA and Atlanta are tied up in the bottom of the 8th, by the way. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, these are very evenly matched teams. And it's like a roller coaster. It seems like the momentum just shifts, and it's just been, it's been fun to watch. It really has. I mean, I'm at other football games and I'm watching. I got like sometimes a couple screens up, and I'm trying to keep up what's going on with everybody and watch my son's game and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been good. It's been a super good series. There's series of baseball, and it's going to be fun going forward. By the way, I think it was last week, I said Buster Olney hit a home run, and gosh, I can't believe it. I don't know what I was thinking. It was Buster Posey. And I caught that, I think, and I was like, what did I just say? Buster Olney? Buster Olney probably hit a home run in his life. he's probably commentated plenty of them, but he hasn't. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, lots of good stuff on baseball. Ryan, what's your thoughts? I mean, do you think it's hard to go against LA and the Dodgers? They are pretty loaded. Atlanta seems to be battling them pretty hardcore, and then Houston, Boston, there again. I mean, it just kind of depends. I couldn't predict either one of these games, the outcome.
You know, it's hard for me to even give a prediction because I'm really firing from the hip when we talk about baseball on here. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, though, it is good to see, like, especially when you get down to the Final Four.
Yeah.
As cool as it is to see a team completely dominate, it's more fun to see it when teams are actually battling it out. And from the sounds of it, and from what I've seen, that's kind of what's going on in the MLB this year. Nobody really knows who's going to win it all, and that you can't really ask for more than that, especially when you get down to the nitty gritty and only a few teams left. So that's good to see.
Exactly. And I mean, it's just fun. And I think more than anything after the COVID stuff, and I hate to keep bringing that up, but there is a lot of excitement around sports right now. I mean, it's just nice to see everybody playing, a lot more normal, activity going on. I mean, every once in a while you get a curveball thrown in there as far as some COVID stuff, but hopefully this thing's getting ready to dissipate and go away, and we're not going to have to worry about this anymore. But other than that, I mean, it's going to be super fun to watch the tail end of this. And then you got college football and NFL, you got college basketball around the corner. And I'm excited, man. I think going forward, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction. Let me see. What do I want to do here? I really feel like Boston. I don't know why. I feel like a Boston Dodger series is brewing. I feel the pot's getting stirred up right now. I don't know. I don't know why I think that, because Atlanta is every bit as worthy, and so is Houston. Obviously Houston looked really good the other night. But a lot of things I look at is pitching, and even though they've been beat, I feel like it's gonna get a lot better, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
Well, we talk a lot about, who can be the hottest team, the latest into the season. From what I've seen, Boston seems to be a hot team right now that's finding ways to get it done. And when we talked about the Dodgers for a while and having a feeling that they would probably advance, still not a given. They might not.
Right.
But every time I've kind of turned on the TV or got online, it's always Boston prevails, and Boston finds a way to pull it out. And from what I've seen, they've kind of been that hot team, man. So it'll be interesting to see if they can advance.
Because they'll take a beating and then they jump right back up. And that's probably what's the most impressive with them is, it's not like they get knocked down and then they have a couple rough games like most teams will. And this year it's these teams are really, really battling, and it's a lot of fun to see. So yeah, it'll be another fun one next week. What's that noise? Oh man, is it already that time?
They're kicking us out of here.
That's right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for joining us this week. Please come back next week and listen, share, like, subscribe. It's going to be a lot of exciting stuff next week. We're getting really close to basketball time, ladies and gentlemen, and it's about to be on. It's going to be a fun year this year when it comes to hoops. Got some more surprise guests coming on. We'll see what stirs up in that arena. We love y'all. God bless. Like I said, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and we will see y'all next week. Peace.